All right, you got a minute 30. For those of you watching, we're looking at this cartoon and we're asking, is this an anti-immigrant cartoon or a pro-immigrant cartoon? And then we are answering or explaining why. Maybe Nick is working. The other reason why. Yeah, that's our 3 minutes. I'll just give you another 15 seconds or so. You ever had a teacher eat while they're talking? Paige, you look alert and awake. Tell us, anti or pro? Why? Like this first guy right here, especially. All of them probably don't look very welcoming, right? But this guy right here in the middle, if you're watching, pointing in the middle, I mean, he's definitely got this. Like, is there any culture in the world that you know of that where this is a welcoming sign? Sticking your hands out in arm's length, right? I can't think of any. I'm spilling apple. Sorry. So there's an anti. Liam, you put pro. Why?
Well, because it looks like the guys in the back, like when they came into like America, maybe they were immigrants, and now they're like rich.
What does it matter if the guy, the shadow in the background is an immigrant? What does that matter?
Because they're not as wealthy as the
Yeah, they weren't as wealthy, right? But what does that? What's that matter? What's the connection to the rest of the painting? How is this tied to? Go back to those other guys. Let me give Liam a chance to answer first, and then are these guys tied to the rest of the picture or no?
I thought it was just the people, like, cities. It's the people, like, earlier.
Okay, so this guy right here is this guy when he was younger. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, that's what you think. Okay, is that what you two? You had your hands up, or are you going to say
I
something
was just
different?
gonna say that I feel like what Liam's gonna say is that's how those more richer guys were in the earlier time, so that they can relate because they were once immigrants
Who should they be able to relate to?
to do
To that guy?
Yeah.
Christian? Yeah. Is that same or something different? Okay, so who's right? Is it the anti-immigrant people? Because they're clearly, or is there something else going on here? I said this a couple weeks ago. I'll say it again. We've got to know how to interpret some of these political cartoons because you've seen some on in the course exam, right, Miss Kelly?
Yeah.
So, right? Okay, so let's wait on that within the class. For now, let's talk about the two different ways of immigration. We're going to talk about two waves of immigration today. We'll get to a third wave of immigration that has taken place in my life and yours. But that's not for the way after that in spring sometime. During the era we're talking about, the industrial era, there were two waves of immigration. One was before the Civil War. If your family is German or Irish, almost certainly, if they came to this part of the world, then they were from this first wave of immigration. My family, Beavers, is German from the name Beaver. I don't claim any relationship to Justin Bieber, okay, right? But that's a German name, right? We came over actually before this time period. Yancey has to be German. It's not. What is it? Chester's Irish. Irish. Okay, so you're probably good heart. McCurdy, that's got to be Scottish or Irish, right? But Irish, so you're maybe came during this time period, right? Christians, your last name?
I don't know. I thought this one was structure everything and she was a German. She said I was redneck German last name. So, what was,
Are you proud of that, or
I did
it is what it is, right? Okay, all right. So from one redneck area of the world to another. We're not rednecks. That's looking up. Okay. In essence, what I'm trying to say is that the region of Europe they're coming from during this time period is north and west, the northern and western part. And this is kind of like par for the course for the most part because the immigrants before this that had come over were also from northern and western Europe. Now, when I say the word Anglo-Saxon, does anybody know what Anglo-Saxon means? British, right? Look, Anglo, England, that's where the word England comes from the Anglo-Saxons. These were ancient, like, maybe not Viking people, but kind of like Viking people. They were kind of like Proto-German. They come to England and they transform England. They become English. When the United States becomes, the American colonies become American colonies, a lot of us were English, right? So these people closely resembled the Irish and the German closely resembled these English, at least as far as this goes. Skin complexion, pale, Caucasian look, right? So at first, they were not, what's the word, accepted, these Irish and German, and maybe some of your Irish or German grandparents might tell you stories about, not fitting in or whatever, or maybe their grandparents not fitting in. And one of the reasons was because the Irish and a lot of the Germans were Catholic. They were not the same as the Protestant English. And so there was a lot of religious strife, right? Catholics believe that the Pope is the head of the church, and Protestants don't. They protest against the Pope, right? So there's that. But the Irish and the Germans looked similar enough as far as their skin tone that eventually, by the end of the 1800s, they had adapted, they had assimilated into a culture. They were accepted by the end. They were so accepted by the end that by the end of this century, the end of the 1800s, like people are doing German and Irish type things. St. Patrick's Day becomes a celebration in every major city across the country, and even minor cities. We have a grade in our school system that's named after a German word. It's actually a German word. What grade in school am I talking about? Huh? Think of school. Latin. Sophomore? No. That's also, it's either Greek or Latin. Sophomore. Sophos means wisdom. Oh, you're the wise class. More, mores, moron, idiot. You're wise fools. Stockholm's are wise fools. Get it? You're not freshmen anymore, but you've got a lot to learn still. Right? So it's none of those. So what is it? Think of the lower grades. A German word. Let me give you a hint. It's not fourth grade. That's not the German word I'm thinking of. It is an elementary, but it's a grade. It's not fifth grade.
Kindergarten?
What's that?
Kindergarten?
Kindergarten. There you go, Jacob Chester. Ding, ding, ding. Good job. Kindergarten. Child's garden. It was a German thing, and the rest of American culture adapted it. And let's not forget that almost every single thing we do at Christmas is of German origin. If you put a tree inside of your house, you are going back to the way Germans used to do things. So these people not liked it first because of their faith, but they did look similar. They started to get accepted and adapted and assimilated. So really what we're looking at here is this wave of immigration right here. And maybe this one right here. This one right here. Now the next one we'll get into is a lot bigger, and that's during the time period we're really talking about, the second wave of immigration. Okay, so, and this is just showing you that most of the people who came over during this pre-Civil War time period to this area were German and Irish. A lot of them stayed in big cities like Boston or New York, but then a lot of them moved out here because they wanted their apartment. Okay, so during this time period, there was something called nativism. And nativism means anti-immigrant. That you favor native-born people over foreign-born people. And when I say native-born, I don't mean Native American. I don't mean Native American. I mean like the white English people that were born here in the United States. Favoring them over others. Washroom? What is it? This isn't England. I don't know. They call it a water closet in England nowadays. Okay. So, you got things like this. If you've ever seen this on my wall, this little sign right here, Irish need not apply. Nativism was seen, and like when people if you own a business, you put this sign in your window because you didn't want Irish people to apply for your job. But nativism also got into politics. There's an entire political party called the Know Nothing Party or the American Party, and their whole thing was that they didn't want German and Irish immigrants coming to the United States. They wanted Congress to close the door to them. They didn't get elected. It didn't work, but that was their goal. They even ran a former president. Millard Fillmore had been president just 6 years before. 5 years. And they got him to run as their president. And even though he finished third place, the point is that they're still having an influence on politics. And later the Republican Party kind of captures these know-nothings into their party, and the Republicans have a little bit of an anti-immigrant stance even today, maybe more than a little bit, if you think about it. So my point here is that there always seems to be, when there's new people, there's always seems to be a reaction to those new people. Okay, here is a flag. Native Americans, beware of foreign influence. We're not talking here in this is a know-nothing flag. We're not talking about Native Americans as in American Indians. We're talking about native, white, Anglo-Saxon people, beware of foreign. Okay, now, a common kind of picture you have seen back then. Here we have the Pope coming over on the boat to the United States, and he's bringing Catholicism, but he's also bringing violence too. And here's a kid saying, a Protestant kid saying, all I know is that there's the Holy Bible, and you don't believe in that, and you stay away. And I'm not. This is full of stereotypes that aren't true, right? But this is the idea. stay away because if the Catholics come over, the Pope will sail up the Potomac River, set up shop in Washington, D.C., and then rule America. And even after this time period, 100 years later, when John F. Kennedy runs for president, a Catholic, people are still worried, should he elect a Catholic? Right? I mean, he got elected anyway, but it took 100 years before that stigma got erased. Okay, so what about the time period that we've been talking about? The second wave of immigration is a different group of people altogether. The European part of this is from Southern and Eastern Europe. Now, there's also Chinese and Japanese immigrants coming over in this wave too, but the main bulk of it was from Southern and Eastern Europe. If you are Italian, if you have any Greek or Jewish or Czech or anything like that, it's very likely that your people came over during this time period, this second wave of immigration. Now, I'm giving you examples here of Central, Southern, and Eastern Europe, just so you can have some names to identify. You don't have to necessarily memorize all of these. But just to get in your head, Russia is in the eastern part of Europe. So is Lithuania, it's very near Russia. So is Poland. Italy is in the south. Greece is in the south. Slavic peoples were considered to be like the lowest of the totem pole, except for maybe the Jews, and maybe the Jews are at the bottom. And that's, why there's a Holocaust and all that kind of stuff, right? But Central Europe, Czechs, Austrians, Hungarians, and they were much different than the Irish and Germans that came before in the first wave. There were Catholics among them, but they were also Orthodox Christians. And to the Protestant Anglo-Saxons of America, the Orthodox Christians, they were weird. Like, we know what it's like to be Catholic, but these Orthodox Christians, they're strange. I mean, you go to their churches, and it's like covered in gold. So like your eyes, like when you go walk in, are just like, oh, whoa, like just all this stuff is sparkling. And they use incense really heavy. I don't know if any of you are Catholic and you know the priest uses incense on a regular basis, but like we're talking like incense everywhere, right? So your senses are bombarded when you enter a Greek Orthodox. And these people, these Anglo-Saxons, and even the Germans and Irish by this point didn't know how to handle this because these people are very different. And then the Jewish people were of a different religion altogether. They were not Christians; they were Jewish. They have a different race, and so this was different to these people. They were also darker complected. The Greeks and the Italians were darker complected than this. I'm pointing to me, if you're listening, right? And to them, people back then, like that mattered. They thought that people like that were of a different race. We don't think of Italians and Greeks as different race. We think of them as white. That's how they thought of them back then. Now, just so you know, there were Irish people that came over during the second wave too, especially to Boston area, right in here, right, New York as well. But what we're really talking about here are people from Central, Eastern, and Southern Europe. And you can notice by 1890, 1900, 1910, there's more people from these regions of the world than there were from the Anglo-Saxon earlier time period. And again, just comparing the first wave of immigration to the second wave of immigration, these two bottom ones of the second wave of immigration, compare that to the first, and you can see it's like the second wave is a big explosion of people coming here to find jobs and find farms. And there's nativism in this second thing too. We looked at some of this already. Labor unions don't like immigrants, don't like immigration because immigrants represent job competition. They work for lower wages. They act as scabs. The stereotype of these people from Southern and Eastern Europe was that a lot of them were anarchists, which means they didn't like government at all. And they wanted to sometimes violently overthrow the government. And then on the other side, there's the socialists and the communists who want government to run just about everything in the economy. And they've been known to be violent as well. We don't want that over here, a lot of the Anglo-Saxon people say. Their religion was different, and so they weren't Protestant Christian. Not only were there some Catholics, but there were also some Orthodox Christians, there's some Jews, and then there were some Chinese Buddhists and Japanese Shinto religions. And nobody knew what to do with them. Actually, the Irish knew what to do with them. The Irish were heavily against Chinese immigration because they didn't want to compete with the Chinese for jobs, especially on the railroads. Unfortunately, there was this stigma attached to Southern and Eastern Europeans that they were intellectually inferior, that they were basically dumber than the Germans and the English, that they were poverty-stricken, which is a whole country full of poor people, that they're a country full of insane and disease-ridden people, and they're a countries full of polygamists, which, do you know what that means? Where a man has more than one wife, right? I'm not saying that there were those kind of people, that was a stereotype. The majority white Americans of the time thought that this new wave of immigrants would be much harder to assimilate, harder to weave into our society. We had done that with the Irish and the Germans, but these new people, they're just too different. And during this time period, many intellectual people, educated people, took the ideas of Charles Darwin, evolution, natural selection, survival of the fittest, and they said that applies to human societies as well. That essentially there are superior races and inferior races, and obviously all these Southern and Eastern Europeans, not to mention Asians coming over, they're all inferior races. I don't believe that. That's what they were saying. And they were using science to prove it. Okay, so there was political ramifications for this because of the Irish getting up in arms against Chinese railroad workers. Congress forbid Chinese immigration until like 1940s. Congress proposed literacy tests. If you want to enter the United States, you have to be able to read and write English. Now, it was vetoed in the late 1800s, these literacy tests were, but then it was passed in 1917, around the World War I time period. Congress also passed laws that said immigrants coming over that have known criminal records can't come over. If they're paupers, meaning they're poor, they can't come over. If they are mentally insane, they can't come over. If they have more than one wife with them, they can't come over. And no matter what, if you come over, you have to pay a 50-cent tax per person, which back then was pretty heavy tax for people coming all the way across the ocean. And then last but not least, there were anti-immigrant organizations, just like the Know Nothing Party. One appealed to the lower classes more. The APA, the American Protective Association, had 1 million members at its height. It was founded in 1887. Some of the things it would do, this is, fake news has been around with us for a long time. You know how Catholic nuns are supposed to be, never get married, they're always supposed to be virgins. Well, they would publish things about nuns doing unnunly things, if you know what I mean, right? To try to put people into a frenzy against Catholics. The Immigration Restriction League was more for educated upper and middle class people, Harvard alumni, and they used the social Darwinist ideas of the day to try to prove scientifically this is why we shouldn't have immigration. and they supported things like Liberty suggests. All right, do you have any questions over any of that right now? Anyone? Okay, then go to that other sheet of paper, flip over on the back, please. There's a question 3 and a question 4. These are the exact same. I do not, that's the front, but I don't want you to answer yet because I want us to go over this. Yeah. This comes from Puck Magazine, and that is a P. It's not another letter. Not even a smile, not even a chuckle. She is, yeah. He's got a little smile. Okay. The title of the cartoon is Looking Backward. Notice it's during the second wave of immigration. Puck was known as a satire producing company or publication. Okay, I don't know if you've gone over satire before in English class. Satire, anyone? No? Okay, well maybe this will help then. Let's go over this before you answer. Let's go over this. Who's the immigrant in this case? Yeah. Dude in the front, right? So for the people at home, let me use the laser pointer on here so you can see. Okay, dude in the front. How do you know he's an immigrant? Look at his clothes. Are his clothes nice? Yes or no? No, they're shabby, right? Why does he have all this stuff? He's moving permanently, right? This is what is called taking with you everything but the kitchen sink, right? He's got his clothes probably here, any money that he might have, which is probably not a lot here, and we know he doesn't have a lot of money because see his pockets kind of coming out there. He's got his pots and pans. Maybe this is his clothes right here. He's got all of his worldly possessions. What's another indication that he's an immigrant besides the way he's dressed and what he has with him? What's another indication that he's not from here? Yeah, Christian?
He's on the dock.
Yeah, he's on the dock, right? Here it is right here. He's coming off of a boat. So we got a pretty good indication that this dude is an immigrant. Okay, what's this guy's attitude towards him? Like we said, like Faith was talking about, stay away. How about this dude right here? What's he trying to do? What if I'm doing this to you? What am I doing to you? Yeah, I can't see you if I do this, right? Ah, hideous! I don't want to see it. What about this one? Is this a welcoming indication? Right? This is judging you. Max, you like using your glasses to like look over down your nose at people? Like this is an effective way to use your glasses. You ever do that? Yeah, you have to because you have the glasses to do it, right? What about this guy? I kind of see it as, what? And this guy, I think, is hailing a taxi cab. Something. I've never really been able to figure out what this guy is doing because he's not looking at the immigrant. He's kind of like, I don't know if he's calling the police over. I don't know what he's doing. Okay. Now, we can't ignore these back here, right? Liam and Max were talking about these guys. So what did these guys represent in the back, Liam? Right? So if these guys if these back here are the immigrants from the first wave, then who are these guys? Yeah, they're the same guys, they're just older. Yeah, this right here is him in the past. Make sense?
And how would you describe these guys now? There's something has changed, right? What's their wealth like? They seem rich, don't they? How do you know? Two indications. Their clothes are really nice and fancy, and for at least these three, they eat well. They have enough money to eat well back then, right? What were they like back then? Poor. What was his occupation? Can you tell? Huh? What is that in his under his arm? It's a brush. What's he using the brush for? He's either cleaning floors or shining shoes, right? Do you make a lot of money doing that? Nope. What about this guy? What's he doing? He's selling trinkets or little, you can get that for me, little pastries or something like that. This guy, I don't know. He looks kind of like a lot like him. He's got all of his stuff on his pack. And am I wrong? Does this guy look like a pickpocket to you? And look at him. He's got his hands in his pockets. Like, what if you saw somebody on the street looking like this? I think he's a thief. What would these guys have said to this guy back then? Hey, come on over. You're just like us, right? I think that we can also assume what ethnicity he is. Anybody know what that little braid of hair represents? Some form of Jewish people have, were you going to say that? Sorry, Max. Have that little single strand of hair. This one? Where would you guess? Look at that hat. That's a hat. It's a wool, like, animal skin hat. Why would you wear something that thick? Yeah, if you're from a place that's cold, right? Where can you think of that's really cold? Russia, maybe northern parts of Germany. Some people might think that this is German too, because of the pointy hat. We'll learn later that German military folks wore pointy hats. They're called Pickelhaube hats. The cartoon is called Looking Backward. The little tagline says they would close to the newcomer the bridge that brought them and their fathers over. Now you tell me, is this a pro-immigration cartoon or an anti-immigration cartoon? On your paper. Is the drawer of this trying to say, yeah, I think that anti-immigration ideas are good? Or is the drawer of this trying to say anti-immigration ideas, especially in that time period, were hypocritical? Because we're all immigrants. If you keep the same thing that you put on the front, fine, tell me that. If you've changed your mind, fine, tell me that. Let me know what you think. And then when you're done, please give your paper to Miss Kelly. Keep your notes. But give that paper to Miss Kelly. Yeah, you keep your notes. Let's see if your mind changed any.